Mark. Okay, I'm ready.
All right. Afternoon, everybody. I'd like to call to order the Thursday, December 20th, 2018 Watertown City Plan Commission meeting. Can I get a roll call, please?
Yes, and then before I take the roll call, we do have some new members, and so Megan Olson resigned from the Plan Commission. So in her place, then Diana Ford will be a member of the Plan Commission and Board of Adjustment. Same thing goes with Megan resigning from Board of Adjustment as well. And then, so now Bonnie Aletsky will be the first alternate for both boards, and then we also are welcoming Jeff Brink as the second alternate. So, and Jeff is here with us today. So now I'll go on with the roll call. Hanson?
Here.
Dolly?
Here.
Aletsky?
Present.
Stein?
Here.
Brink?
Here.
And then also I should note that Adam Lallam is now the liaison from the city council for the Plan Commission, so.
I see him
And
back
he
there.
is present.
Thanks for joining us, Adam. Thanks, Jeff.
Stand and wave.
All right, moving on. Item 1, invitation for public comment participants submittal. We'll have a place later on for open public comments if you're here to speak on behalf of an item that's not on the agenda today. Item 2 is the approval of the agenda. Can I get a motion?
I'll second.
Motion by Stein, second by Hanson. All in favor? All opposed? Motion passes. Item 3 on the agenda is the approval of the minutes from the December 6, 2018 meeting. Need a motion?
I'll make the motion.
Motion by Hanson,
I'll second that.
second by Aletsky. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Item 4 on the agenda is a plat of the Gulfview Estates 13th edition. Brandy?
So this is similar to what you guys have seen earlier in the year for the plat of Gulfview Estates 12th edition, where we also updated the preliminary plan for this area. So why it is before you today is there are 6 lots being platted, which kicks it out of the minor replat or the minor plat category. And then also just to note, there were requirements that the preliminary plan was approved conditionally as long as within 2 years that within the 3 years, the developer shall replace the existing 15-inch CMP culvert with a 15-inch RCP culvert with flared ends on both sides. The developer shall install an overflow structure concurrent to the replacement of the culvert. A deed restriction shall be submitted and recorded for the detention pond area, and the berm shown on lot 22 shall not encroach with the lot lines and shall be revised upon platting, which, as you can see on the plat before you, those lot lines have not been adjusted yet for that southwest corner of lot 22. We have been in contact with the developer's agent and the developer, letting them know that that was a condition of the approval of the preliminary plan, and he is out right now with the holidays. So we will be receiving that before this is brought to council, that these lot lines are adjusted so that the berm for the detention pond area within that block 2 of Golf Course Edition, if you guys can see my mouse up here. So, the berm runs along there. Can you guys see that? The mouse. Is there? Sure.
Brandy, is the berm going to start in that corner and then work all the way down, or?
Yep. So on lot 22, that western property point, and I'll show it on here after.
Sorry, I couldn't see it from there.
1 second. Oh.
Top button. Yeah, but we can't see that on the screen. So I'll still try and do the other.
Oh, okay.
Type in pointer for me. There it is. That shows up better on the screen.
Perfect.
Yep.
Thanks. Okay, so the berm starts here on this corner of lot 22, and then it runs down on block 2 and then actually down into here where this is where that culvert is. So when when we looked at that during the preliminary plan stage, we just didn't want it encroaching into lot 22, so it was never obstructed where the homeowner, whoever purchases lot 22, would do anything to manipulate the berm. And then, because that berm is serving for the detention of the entire neighborhood.
Brandy, if I may, and in lieu of encumbering that corner of that lot with a drainage easement, which is another option we had to consider, I thought it would be cleanest, and I talked to Brandy about modifying that lot line slightly. What I found is if we as staff and you as a planning commission can minimize any easements or encumbrances of easements on lots, particularly in this case where a simple lot line adjustment would prevent the need for an easement, and then the future home buyers, homeowners, lot owners don't have to have conflicts with those easements on their property. One, they're paying taxes on them. Two, they typically want to do something with that area of their land at some point in the future, whether it's 2 years or 20 years from now. And then we as staff have to go back and explain, no, there's restrictions because of the easement. So that modification of the lot line would really help clean all that up and eliminate the need to explain those things later to the future property owners.
If you modify the lot line, how much of the lot is gonna go away? Do you wanna have it kinda like where your stick is right there?
Yeah,
From
it's
there to
actually,
there?
it's gonna, so that property corner there, or that property pin, and then about down to where these arrows are, to where my pointer's at now. Well,
How many feet is that on the
the-
bottom part?
The lot itself is 228 feet wide and 80 feet long. So, I mean, looking at it, I'm not sure what the exact square footage would be, but the lot itself is 22,855 square feet. So it's already, I mean, this is zoned R1 single-family residential, which the minimum lot size requirement is 9,000 square feet. So it's double that. And so it won't make it a non-conforming lot, and they'll still be able to adhere to their setback requirements.
It looks like based off of that 10-foot easement that's drawn on there, that it's about 30 or 35 feet, just judging by that size.
So it's not gonna be that big of a difference, it's just gonna make it more of an irregular shaped lot without taking away anybody's
Right.
ability to do anything.
For-
How tall is that berm gonna be?
I don't. Colin, do. It's only a few feet.
It's not like one of them 8-foot berms, like by the, the park and stuff.
Yeah.
I do think that's a good idea, though. I mean, compared to what we had before, we had the conditional use or the criteria that it would have the easement along that to cover that berm area, but moving the property line over would serve the same purpose and be a little bit cleaner.
Yeah, and to hit on her point a little bit, that berm is already there. Everything's already built out before. So it is, I think the max is 5 feet is where it gets up to, and that's just the beginning of it, so it's a little bit lower right there.
But now, that's where some wetlands is that gonna stay wetlands or forever and ever? Good.
Yep. And we also have we have received the deed restriction for Block 2 of Golf Course Edition. So that's already been taken care of. So
Does the city of Watertown own that, or the developer's gonna own that?
the developer will own it perpetually. So, and I calculated it, if it is about 30 feet, it'll be about 1,400 square feet that they'll be losing. But it'll make it cleaner for when they do buy it, that they're not upset that they have this berm that they would like to flatten, and then they find out that they're paying taxes on a berm that's protecting the entire neighborhood, so.
Yeah, I mean, it should be beneficial to the owner, right? You gotta pay less taxes.
And they can't fence it in,
Right.
but now they will, if they don't if they don't own it, then they can do the fence if they want to and leave that berm out.
Well, and if we would have had a drainage easement over top, they technically couldn't have either. But it's just the fact that then they're not feeling like they're restricted on their property that they own.
No, I agree with that. Does that add any additional steps to the process since they're coming to plat this anyway? They'll just change the description of the property at that point in time?
Yeah, well, it'll still be lot 22 of golf course 13th edition. Golf View, what the heck? Golf View Estates 13th edition.
It would just
Mr.
change.
Chairman, what I would envision is that if your approval this evening was contingent upon this requirement, that we would carry that correction through to the council before their action.
Okay.
I haven't consulted with our city attorney yet on that, but that's how I envision this proceeding.
And has this been brought to the developer at all or the landowner?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the landowner or the property owner, the agent, and the agent's engineer.
And we don't see any problem with that. They were going to be happy with that change.
Yeah,
Okay.
yep, and they've acknowledged it and they'll make those changes, but like I said, the engineer has just been out with the holidays, so.
Mr. Chair, if I may, just one more point to expand on why we felt it was logical to do this. That berm being part of a localized neighborhood detention pond too was part of the conversation and considerations here. I would say it is uncommon to see part of a detention pond or detention cell, berm or swale or whatever it might be encumbered into one of the private lots being platted. So that was one of the considerations that we wanted to give to this too.
Is that land then going to be turned over to the city at some point in time, or has part of it already been turned over?
No, it hasn't been, and the city would, rather not take over private detention ponds. So it all depends on what the regional benefit is.
I know in other areas we've done some parks. You know, we were looking at Eastwoods the other day, and that's kind of serves as a detention pond and as a park. You know, for that neighborhood community. So I'm not sure what the stance is on each of the developments, but in some cases we do take on some of that property.
And kind of going forward, just with our different discussions with the park board and everything, most of that land, if it is used for detention, we would like to stay away from accepting that as parkland.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and in
That's
this
just my
area,
thought, too.
I'm pretty sure it's pretty wet.
Yeah.
So it's just, they'll just stay kind of the swampland, wetland area.
We need those.
Yeah, yep,
More and more of
exactly.
them.
Yep.
Do you know, Brandy, with certainty whether the development agreement stipulated the perpetual ownership of that detention area?
Well, there was no dedication on the plat.
Okay.
And then we did receive a deed restriction for that area too. So it is acknowledging that they are the owners and that they cannot build on it.
Okay. Thank you.
Are you going to put something, this is just me thinking off the cuff, like in 50 years from now, someone comes along and says, I really want to fill that in and develop it. Is there any way that something that we can put in writing, or will it be in writing that can never happen there?
It is recorded at the courthouse, so if that, and Matt will have to chime in probably, or Heath, if it were to be lifted, if someday that they came up with a new plan for detention and that they wanted to fill that in and develop it, I would imagine that would have to be lifted by council.
Yeah, the city would have to approve that,
Yeah.
to remove that deed restriction.
But yeah, otherwise it is recorded, so anybody that, say that property goes up for sale and somebody's like, yeah, I'm gonna buy it and develop it, they would see that when they would do a title search. Any other questions?
If there's no other questions, I'll look for a motion from the board. We have before us an action to approve with the conditions as specified by staff.
I'll make that motion to, to modify lot 22 as suggested by staff.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second. Any additional discussion? All in favor? Opposed? Motion passes. Yeah. Item 5 on the agenda is the comprehensive land use plan revisions approval.
Yes, so this includes our updates to the comprehensive land use plan that Luke has been guiding us through. So this includes meeting 3 and 4, and then it also has the recommendations that were taken from the joint Park Board and Plan Commission meeting. So I don't know if you guys had a chance to read through them, and I'll read them out loud just for anybody that's listening in, or and then also that if there's anything that I missed that you guys specifically can remember, then we'll add that to the list after each meeting section. So for meeting 3, we talked about future land uses, and per meeting discussion, these revisions are approved by the Plan Commission to be included in the plan. So to make reference to the Sioux Rural Water Territory for annexation purposes within the designated area, consider pedestrian transportation to parks and residential areas and within city parks, update sidewalk plan, include the Lake Kempesca master plan in the lake redevelopment area, update major street plans specifically on the east side of the city, update any sign code references that have recently been updated throughout the plan, and reconcile zoning the properties for what their uses actually are, specifically Kemp Avenue and rezoning to C2 commercial or community commercial. So is there anything on there that you guys specifically remember that should be added to the list? I mean, I rewatched our meetings and made sure to include anything that was discussed.
Yeah, when I read through this, I couldn't think of anything that you haven't already covered, other than the ones that are specific to the park board meeting.
Okay. Sounds good. You had additions for that list?
No, just when I first read through this, there's some stuff about the sidewalk plan and stuff as it pertains to the parks, and then there were some additional notes that are covered under the next page in your
okay.
presentation here.
Sounds good. So then for the Park Board and Plan Commission meeting, some takeaways there were that concept plan should be brought to the Park Board so that they are able to evaluate the subdivision and proposed park location prior to a developer committing extensive engineering that comes forth in the preliminary plan stage, which is when the Park Board has historically been approached. Amend Title 14 to clarify park dedication requirements, which should also be consistently reflected in the subdivision regulations in Title 24. And then add language stating the distance a residential lot should be platted from a dedicated park.
And is that distance going to be the half mile?
Most likely, and I know that's something that we already have in the plan, that we're trying to keep parks within a walking distance, and that is the half mile. But remember, we had that conversation about specifically saying that a lot couldn't be platted, and that would make sense for consistency purposes to say however many feet. And I know we also talked that we didn't know if we wanted to get that specific either, but to have just assurances in there that if it was a residentially zoned lot, that it was within walking distance of a park.
And then item 2 on the dedication requirements, that's kind of where we got into that a lot cannot be platted until the dedication happens. Is that correct?
Right, and that just needs to be cleaned up quite a bit because it's so vague right now where it says that it should be done dedicated or money accepted at cash in lieu at the time of annexation or master planning, which we don't even refer to anything as master planning, and we would not know what the use of the land would be at time of annexation. So we need to just all be on the same page with what our intentions are for park dedication requirements, and then just spell it out in the ordinance.
Perfect.
Brandy, I don't think I was here on the September 20th. Subject near and dear to my heart, number 6. What was the upshot of the update, the sign code references that have recently been updated throughout the plan?
So there were references like along Highway 81, specifically what I can remember, but anything that's changed in the recent ordinance amendment that we've made to the sign code, that would just be reflected, anything that was outdated. Just to make reference, I mean, it won't be changing anything that we adopted, just to keep it all consistent now with that change.
So wherever else in that chapter that referred to signs, we would make sure that it's consistent with the actual sign code section that we've rewritten essentially recently.
So it's changing this to match the existing sign code, not the other way around.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, because Luke's been working on this document for quite a while, so there's some outdated information. Heck, he was still updating it when Jeff was in my position. And if you guys didn't know that too, and I don't know if you guys were here or not, but Jeff was the previous urban planner, so forgot that little tidbit.
So Brandy, do you feel like he's sitting there just judging you?
Yeah, he's being pretty quiet. I mean, he could be really testing me.
Just soaking it all in right now.
Jill and I gave him an orientation yesterday. So we actually told him that we would make fun of him.
Got to give him a break and let him get acclimated again before you.
Exactly. It's got to get
All right.
reacquainted.
Was there anything else on either of those first two sections? Okay, let's move on.
Move
the
on to
last
meeting
section
4,
then.
and so
Yeah.
these sections covered the redevelopment area, and we talked about the Millette redevelopment area, the Lincoln redevelopment area, and the Magic Mile redevelopment area. So for Millette, we talked about brownfield designation and identification of known areas, and we directed Luke to reach out to Sioux Falls and include language on how to handle redevelopment near railroads, where their downtown is redeveloping, and how that's how they're dealing with
Yeah,
brownfields.
I know he was gonna, benchmark some other communities and look
Yep.
at how they approach that, so.
Yep. So then,
What's a brownfield? What?
it's contaminated soil. So that in that Millette area, I think, and close to our railroads too, there could be potential brownfields. So we had talked about if we would actually identify where those areas are, and then it's something for people to take into consideration when they're redeveloping, and what that would entail. Because sometimes they have to, dig it up? That's basically.
Yeah, the discussion was the mitigation requirements on
Mitigation,
those
that's
properties. But I believe we also discussed, to the extent that we would want to, as a city, identify those in a master plan type of setting, for fear of not wanting to drive the market per se based on what's out there, but also obviously have whatever information we have at hand in our offices available for questions that may get proposed to us regarding potential brownfield contamination issues.
Yeah, we don't wanna, hazard a guess on a property that we don't know for sure too. So the situation, if you were to identify an area, would be that you might be identifying an area that doesn't necessarily have contamination. And so you gotta be careful, how you handle that.
Like on the Magic Mile, are you talking like from Broadway east to like 11th Street or what?
Luke calls Highway 212 the Magic Mile.
So, like a phase 1 study, would you have that done on every property or what?
For brownfields?
Yeah.
Well, this is just in the Millette area, and which is like Kemp North. So it includes a lot of older industrial businesses or properties, and then, there are still.
Like Kemp to 2nd Street or 2nd Avenue North?
Probably.
farther north than that?
Well, that's, I think, contamination where the railroad was there would probably be that.
The
West,
old railroad.
Oh, like where the city cop shop is and stuff like that? That part?
No.
that would be included.
And running west of there. I mean, it's the original Watertown downtown, 100 years ago.
Well, we'd get a few city buildings with it.
But no, I think leaving that in the hands of Luke so he can benchmark other communities and see how it's best handled, that would be appropriate.
Yeah. Yep, so then he will include that information. And then for the Lincoln area, the Stromseth edition updates to refer to Willow Creek Drive instead of just Willow Creek so there's not confusion. The floodplain should be addressed south of Highway 212. Revise the map 58, the future land use map, the mixed use areas to change the shown industrial zoning within the area east of the south bypass, west of the railroads, and south of Highway 212 to light industrial, highway commercial mixed use area. And that was the only area that along 212 that was not designated as a future mixed use. So it seemed appropriate to do that with its proximity to commercial and industrial, with it being, because then the railroads for Glacial Lakes Energy is right to the east of that property. And then for the Magic Mile, which is Highway 212, to refer to the DOT, or reference to DOT coordination and transportation planning as construction completes for the reconstruction of Highway 212 and that 3-phase project.
It kind of rolls into the new business that you have here on the agenda with the prioritization for next year, but some of the things that we talked about is the new districts that could potentially fit in some of these areas. And so, I guess depending on how we prioritize these, we may want to make sure or preclude some of them from the comprehensive land use plan, depending on which direction we go. If we want to start looking at campus and civic use and mixed use districts and make sure that they're addressed.
Right, and he does address them, and that would be the model ordinance amendments that we would go from. Now, they might change slightly, when we're taking it through the whole public process, but at least it's kind of our starting point, and we would use that information. So, and he doesn't get too in depth with it, just mentions kind of why it would be beneficial, and then how it would be used and implemented, but it doesn't get specific. So that is a good mention, but we haven't gotten to that point yet.
Yep.
That'll be coming. And I think Luke's going to just have one more meeting. He hasn't finished. You guys remember that he called Uncle on this meeting, and we have a couple more areas to go over, and then he will go over the future zoning districts that they've come up with.
Yep. Yeah, that sounds good.
So if there's no more discussion on that, then if you guys want to take a vote on these or to approve these revisions, so that Luke has a list of what we would like added and changed and researched.
Do you need a motion for that?
Yes, please.
Solicit a motion then from the board?
It would just be a motion
There
to
you go.
approve as is, if you guys agree.
I have a motion by Stein to approve.
Second.
A second by Hanson. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion approved. Thank you for putting that together, Brandy.
Yeah, it was a treat to get to listen to it twice.
I'm sure. All right, moving on to item 6 is open public comment participants. Anybody in the audience that wants to speak on something not on the agenda? Seeing none, I'll move on to new business.
Is this where, okay, so this is where we have the oh my gosh. Well, Heath's gonna talk about this first anyway, so he can explain it. He can say the agenda item.
All right.
Yeah.
Kick it
We're
over
going to
to
talk
Heath.
about prioritization this evening. Yeah, thank you, Brandy. I'll pass this back over to Brandy in a second. I just wanted to give a little bit of an opening statement and background. some of the, and just for the planning commission's knowledge, some of the information that you guys do not review, such as commercial site plans, that we just review and do the building permit administratively for a lot that's been platted, and there's no reason for it to come to you guys. But we have tried to streamline that process and put protocol in place to help that submittal, the application, and the information that's requested at that time. We've compiled some documents, some checklists and protocol there for that. So try to tweak things, and one of the measures that we're also trying to make, I feel like goes in line with this prioritization. Rather than taking a shotgun approach at how we continually improve our processes and our regulations and how we administer them and what they say and what they require. We wanted to, take a more targeted approach to that because it does get overwhelming when we look at the list. And so we thought we'd share with you folks, with the Planning Commission this evening, what some of those items are that are hanging out there yet to be done, and then get a targeted approach with them on how to move forward. So what we've done, Brandy and I and Colin have looked at this list of just shy of a dozen items, I think, and have a few recommended low-hanging fruit items, and then some targeted ones we seen as staff as what might be the next logical steps to take in making some of these improvements. And so, Randy, I'll have her go down that list with you, share what our recommendations are, and by all means, and does the Planning Commission have a copy of that list, Randy?
Yep.
Okay. And by all means, if you guys have other ideas from what we've proposed, that's why we're here tonight, to discuss that and finalize how we should move forward in 2019.
Thanks, Heath.
Oh, yeah. Yep, let me pull it up. Thank you, Heath. I'll get this pulled up here. Oops. It's really buried. Okay, so and these are just listed randomly, so we have, and it is actually a baker's dozen, it's not one, it's 13 items. So we have a mixed-use district, campus district, civic use district, and as Blake alluded to, these are districts that are talked about in the comp plan. And also, these are all items that we have discussed throughout 2018, and a lot of them are loose ends, and so that's where Heath had talked about too. There are some low-hanging fruit where we should be able to have something to amend the ordinance to just finalize those, and we'll go through those. But home occupations, the R2A front yard setbacks, daycares, downtown overlay district, parks master plan, Title 14 ordinance amendment, which is the park dedication, R3 language consideration after a certain number of units, and that discussion, if you remember, came from the stencil group, sign code and addressing billboards, group home, because with the sign code, if you guys remember too, we had just addressed what we were out of compliance with as far as being content neutral, so we did know that we would have to come back at a later date and then address other parts of the sign code ordinance. And then group homes or licensed residential treatment homes and resorts. So from our evaluation, the top 3 priorities, and one of them is involved because it's a low-hanging fruit that we've spent quite a bit of time on, and I think that we're pretty close to coming to a conclusion with that one. So it would be the mixed-use district, and that's just kind of the trend of development so that we have something that people can utilize without having to have a PUD plan, which is similar to a building permit about how technical it has to be when you guys are rezoning a property to be PUD, which is a planned unit development.
This mixed-use district, would that cover the commercial/residential proposed?
Yep.
We've seen some of those proposals around the Willow Creek development area.
Yep.
This would be that kind of district then.
Yep. Yeah, and like on the C3 commercial or the C2, it allows for apartments, but only a certain number, and they can't, they have to be, it's very specific. Where this could maybe be a little more open-ended for people to utilize, because obviously it is important to have residential and commercial intertwined.
Yeah.
So then, the R2A front yard setback is another one of the top 3 priorities that staff feels, just because we have spent quite a bit of time, and I know, Blake, you brought this one up quite a while ago, where if we could, and I think that we're pretty close there.
I think so too. I mean, you'd put together quite a bit of material on that, and I don't think we're too far off from just being able to do an
Right.
amendment change.
Right, yeah, because the last meeting that we had, I think you guys were just wanting some more illustrations of what was proposed.
I think the language was good. We were going to amend the language with some illustrations, kind of showing an example of it, and then I think that's basically ready.
Yeah, and then
How are you going to change that? What are you going to change it from, and what are you going to change it to?
right now, R2A is the single-family attached, and that is 25-foot front yard setbacks, and which is an issue a lot of the times for corner lots, and there is also the inline provision. So I believe what we had come to previously, or where we had landed, was that we would make a 20-foot front yard setback, and then 15 on the narrow. Cause didn't we have like the width, and then
We were going to treat them differently depending on if it was the narrow side or the long side of the lot, because you know all those lots on the R2A are long and narrow, and that's what exacerbates this issue, right? Because if you got a 48-foot wide lot and you got a 25-foot setback there, plus a 9-foot on the other side, or a 6-foot,
nothing.
6-foot,
You have nothing.
I mean,
Yeah, okay.
you had about a 17% of your lot was buildable area, so.
Okay, makes sense.
Anyway, I think we're pretty
I like
close
it.
on that one, so.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and it eliminates a lot of variances that you guys see as the Board of Adjustment. And that's something, too, that we had talked about at the meeting yesterday over the lunch hour. And trying to address those variance requests that we're seeing consistently and try to change the ordinance, because obviously something isn't working if we're seeing a lot of variance requests. So, and then number 3 would be the Title 14 ordinance amendment. And that is that park dedication, because it's been such a struggle, especially this last year for sure, about what we're getting for park dedication. I feel like now the Plan Commission and Park Board are on the same page, and that we'll be able to work together cohesively. And then, but as long as we get just in the ordinance where it's very clear about when and where and at what time, when, I said that, is we're getting the park dedication.
One I don't see on here that we've also talked about during the comprehensive land use review would be a lake district.
Okay.
I know Luke has talked about it with us. Everybody on the board has, and in the city staff realizes that has been an area that needs some attention. So sooner or later, we're going to have to address that one as well. It's probably not a top 3 priority, but it should be on the list.
I think that is a really important one too, and I'm actually surprised that I forgot it. And we'll be addressing that as the Lake Compesca Master Plan rolls out.
Yeah.
They've made some helpful recommendations there, and it kind of goes hand in hand with the resorts, because we've been trying to handle the resorts as a way to get a commercial use within the R1 single family district, and that we need a lot more public engagement on, because it would be such a change in that district if somebody would come to the Board of Adjustment and ask for the conditional use, and the board would go through the requirements and make sure that the lot is conforming and everything. But it would be impactful for the neighbors, especially adjacent. So we want to be cautious of that. and still protect their property rights. And so how they had kind of proposed it, where that we would rezone lake properties to R1L, and then obviously we do have some commercially zoned areas where maybe they'll be redeveloped, and then also there are some undeveloped land that is zoned commercial. So maybe that can be developed as commercial instead of having to go in and, retrofit these single-family homes into something commercial, because it is something that is a want. I mean, people express that during this whole process of to have some commercial uses on Lake Compesca. So they kind of go hand in hand, but that is good because it is separate. And then low-hanging fruit would be the home occupations, R2A, front yard setbacks, and daycares. Where if we just, between Jill and I, we've had, we've presented some information to you, and we've gotten feedback. So it would just be a matter of us having some time in our schedules, and if to prioritize really to get these things, because these are things that came up in 2018. Now we're going to start a new year, and it's just going to keep adding. So we want to be efficient in getting these things resolved.
Yeah, I think having a prioritized list is definitely going to be beneficial for everybody, and we can burn through these things, by priority and get them taken care of and move on to the next thing.
Right.
There's a lot of good stuff on there, and you guys don't have unlimited time, so this is good to put it on a list and prioritize it.
Yeah, and then just, we can check in here and there, and you guys have the list too, and we can add this somehow, so it can be kind of an interactive document as well, where then you guys can say, like, hey, it's March and we haven't seen any of these, what are you doing? Or that if you want something expedited.
Yeah, and it would be good too, so we do have some members missing this evening, and it'd be good to get their feedback as well on, what they see as priorities for the 2019 year. Kind of make it a living document a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Did you need any action on this tonight, or are you just gauging our...
Yeah, we were just looking for feedback to have a discussion with you guys and seeing what your thoughts were on this.
It sounds good to me. The other districts that weren't addressed as top priorities, the campus, the civic use, the Lake District. It'd be good to see those districts probably sooner rather than later in conjunction with the comprehensive land use plan, since they're going to be called out in that document. At least, it doesn't necessarily have to be in line with the release and approval of that document, but shortly thereafter would certainly be nice to have that all fleshed out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree.
Again, pardon me for talking about the sign code one, but, and Matt, maybe you can refresh my memory, but when we completed the sign code, 2 years of meetings on it, just earlier this year when it was finally approved by the city council, I don't remember in 2 years of sitting there in meetings that we bypassed billboards, with the intent of coming back to it later. Could you help me out there and refresh my memory on that?
You're asking if we did bypass billboards?
Well, from what Randy was saying, that it was something that we were going to have to go back to revisit because of content neutral. I don't remember specifically having that discussion or making that decision as part of the sign code, primarily because it already is content neutral. It's not location neutral, but that's not an issue with Gilbert versus Reed, which is the whole content neutral thing. And in my understanding, and that's why I'm asking if we need to revisit it for purposes that I did.
Well, no, my understanding is I'm not sure exactly how it currently reads, whether or not it violates Gilbert, but I know that there was some thought in the city that about potentially limiting billboards. And so that was the reason I think that the idea was brought to the committee. And if I recall, it was kind of brought towards the end of those discussions, and the thought was, let's get past what we've already agreed to, and then we can address billboards down the road if that's what we feel, if the community feels like that's something we want to do. If I'm mistaken on that, chime in.
No, you're right. And then because we weren't out of violation with that part of the sign code, but what we do refer to them as off-premise signs, which how do you know if it's off-premise if you're not reading it? So
Well, by the location, for one, but.
right, and that's what we would have to address, and then also with the Sign Code Board of Appeals, for Stein sign, the allowing the electronic message center be larger than normal. I think that was the variance. So, and they justified it because of how it's distance from the right of way. So for visually, so that you can see it. I mean, it makes sense. So, but then to just add that so it's consistent, so we don't have to have a variance for that. So then to look at the size requirements of off-premise signs and then what we actually want to refer to them as.
So you're thinking that there'll be another sign code committee thing going then?
Yeah, that was I remember when it came through Plan Commission that it was okay. This is approved, but it's not done yet. That it'll be coming back through.
And there was some pretty extensive committee work that had been done on the other batch of ordinance, right? Mm-hmm. So I'd expect that if anything comes back before us again, that we're going through a similar type process with.
Right. I think that was the idea, is that we've done all this work and got to a point where we have a product that we can put in front of the council to approve. Let's not let that fall to the wayside while we argue about something new. Let's get that solidified, and then we can start arguing about something new. I think that was the thought on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, to just address the issues at hand,
Right.
which were the exempt signs and the temporary signs. The temporary signs was the big one with the boulevard. So, and that's not going to change. That's not what this one will be about. Unless you guys want it to.
And I would say just as far as the location and the off-premise, I think there is some debate still in the legal community of whether or not the sign codes do have to be content neutral, yes. You shouldn't have to read the sign to know whether it violates the law, yes. But in regards to off-premise, you're looking at the sign, seeing if it matches the building that it's next to. I think there's some gray area in there. And I think there is a couple of pending cases that may flush that out a little more.
Fair enough. That was talked about at the sign code committees. And I think, again, my recollection of the decision at that time was that because there were some pending cases and there was some gray area, that Watertown didn't necessarily need be the one to blaze the trail in that, and waiting for some of these further court cases to be decided for, again, providing some light, shall we say, on the subject. And I don't know that we'd have that yet, but
I don't think that the push to discuss billboards has to do necessarily with whether or not our code currently violates the Constitution. I think the push was whether or not we could do something to limit the number of them. And that's certainly up for discussion and debate. But
well, yeah, but I mean, if we're going to do that, then let's call it a spade. If we're doing to the extent of trying to limit billboards, then let's call it that. And let's not hide behind the veil of content neutral or
I'm not sure that
I'm not talking
Right,
to you. I'm just
right.
saying let's if we're going to do that, let's call it what it is.
Right.
Part of the reason for wanting to look at the billboard regulations is that we're about to reconstruct Highway 212 through our town, and we have a lot of billboards that will be affected, and they'll be moved. So if we are about to change our regulation, or if we're considering changing it in the future, we should try to get that done before the changes are made so we're not looking at brand-new billboards being out of compliance with what we want for our ordinance. And the ordinance has frustrated people. There hasn't been consensus on the billboard section. People have given up in frustration because of lack of consensus. But it's that 212 project coming up that really is pushing the issue forward right now.
Madam Mayor, would you suggest then getting a committee in place to discuss this very quickly then, if we're going to anticipate doing any kind of ordinance changes?
I do, and if we don't have the stomach for it, we don't have the stomach for it. But I don't want to sit on it and then go, oh, there's the 212 project, guess we missed that boat. Let's look at it now and decide if we want to make a change or not. Because it is complicated and it's controversial, and there are plenty of folks that have told us as elected officials to clean that up. And I've been asked on many occasions can't we do something about it? It's, there's no conformity or consistency. Big, little, up, high, down, low, they're all over the place. And if we're okay with that as a community, I guess we don't need to do anything. But if and there are quite a few people that would like to change it, I guess we need to decide if we want to move forward with that or not, because we are going to miss the boat very soon. And the project's coming in a couple phases. Most of the billboards are in the second phase. So we have a couple years for that, but there are some that are going to be in that first phase.
I think the last iteration of this, though, it took quite some time for the committee to come to terms and to provide an ordinance change that was acceptable to the board and to the council.
Right, but the billboard part has been controversial
Right.
and set aside because it was a hot potato, and we didn't want it to bog everything else down. So we did kind of like, okay, let's just move it aside, get what we can all agree on done, and then come back. And that's where we are we going to come back or are we not? Because this 212 project is not going to wait for our sign consideration.
What would the process be of putting together a committee on that topic? Where does that get initiated, and how does it get staffed?
Staff. Yeah, last time, former city attorney Justin Getz was the spearhead on that, so maybe Matt would do that. Or anyone, I mean, I could too.
Yeah, we can talk, and Brandy and I can team up on it. How about that?
Sounds good, fair.
No, yeah, I mean, do we want it to be something as soon as possible, or where are we at on the?
If there's going to be proposed language coming forth for this, I think that a committee should be in place and that it should get, appropriate discussion and input from the community, so.
I agree. I think if we just let it sit and let it let that 212 project happen, where most of our billboards in our town exist, we are really acting by not acting. We're going, it's okay the way it is. And maybe that's what the community feels. But I do think that we separated the billboards out because of their controversial nature. And we didn't want it to wreck everything else. That sign code has been such a challenge for our community. And it hasn't been easy any step of the way. And people reside on both sides of the issue. So we as a community should come together and not try to cram anything down throats, but to come to an agreement on what we think is appropriate for our community. And you're a big part of that as the Plan Commission. You're there to provide guidance and input. So that's why the Plan Commission should weigh in on this very carefully.
Yeah, I mean, I think before we have a group put together, there should be some sort of a discussion point, like an agenda. If the mayor, if you have an idea about what you may like to see, just a starting point. Because if we just come together as a group and then go, okay, what do we think about billboards? We may not get anywhere. And so even if the Plan Commission wants to, express opinions, it'd be a good place to have a good to have a starting point to start the discussion, you know. So, Mayor, did you have specific?
I don't have an opinion.
Okay.
I have to admit, I've not taken an active role in that. I've received lots of comments and people urging me to take it up, and I have to admit, it's with great trepidation because I've seen the controversy, and I don't really have in my mind an idea of what I think is right or good. But I acknowledge that people think what we have isn't working and we should improve it. So I'm willing to take that forward and try and shepherd that through. I think we should.
And it could even really start off as an exploratory committee that discusses the issue and determines how we want to proceed forward, have representation from all sides, and try to get some sort of consensus of what we're even going after here.
Right. It might be a good idea. I mean, if there was folks that may have explicitly expressed this idea to you, to get some of those folks involved, if they're willing, that have a strong opinion about it, and then we can bring together the certainly the sign company community and as well as opponents, and then just see where everybody's at and see if there's even a path forward.
Right, and even if it's, you know, everybody that exists is grandfathered, but anything new moving forward will have these other criteria, and we can agree as a community that's what we want. This is how our ordinances are written, and it's ultimately the Board of Adjustment then that has to enforce that when people go, please don't make me do that. They're asking you for a variance. Mm-hmm. And if you've just passed a code and you say this is what we want, that's got to be something you're willing to enforce. And that's the challenge. So getting that right.
And from a staffing standpoint, this is all great background information for me, not having been familiar with what our sign code discussions were prior to me coming here, but having experience in assisting and rewriting sign code in previous communities, every community does it differently. And so from a staffing standpoint, we'd be glad to help shepherd these discussions with the committee, a subcommittee, and do any potential research that we might want to do based out of those discussions that come out of that committee. You know, how other communities might handle certain talking points that we bring up in that committee. And a lot of times that is helpful in those discussions to explore what the options are on how to potentially handle an issue that we're faced with. And so from a staffing standpoint, we'd be more than happy to shepherd this along and add it to our, I'd say it sounds like one of our top 3 now, maybe our top 4, considering the Highway 212 work that's coming soon.
I don't think it's going to be a short process to go through these discussions. So, yeah.
When are they going to start 212? In the year 20?
I think they're bidding out in February. Is that correct, Jeff?
Yeah, they're hoping to get it let in February. It's not on the letting schedule yet for the state, but they're hoping to get it let in February, and that would be for Highway 20 to Highway 81. That would be the piece that they'll build next summer, and then it'll be 2 years after that. They're planning on going from Highway 81 to 19th Street.
So they're going to start in 19?
Yes.
And there's a bridge, so that's a big part of the first phase.
Mayor, what bridge is that? Is that 3rd Avenue Bridge?
No, that will be the Highway 212 bridge across the Big Sioux River.
Okay, thank you.
So that's a huge part of the project, and it's complicated.
Any other comments? All right.
Doesn't look like it.
Good
I
deal then.
appreciate you
Well,
putting this together, Brandy, and thanks everybody for the discussion throughout this.
Yeah, we'll look forward to 2019.
Yeah. Was
Got
there
a game plan.
Was there any other new business?
No,
Do you have any old business?
no, I don't.
No old business? Any reason for executive session?
Nope.
Then I'll take a motion to adjourn. Motion by Stein. Second by Hanson. All in favor? Opposed? We're adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, and yeah, thank you guys for all your hard work for 2018, and have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you too.
Thanks.